So there's an area of Quebec that my mum just will not go near. We don't go into Canada that often, but we used to have an aunt who lived in Quebec, and she owned a cottage in a small sort of remote lake. My summers were spent at this cottage, and a lot of my family would also come up to visit. Behind the cottage was a huge forest that spanned for miles and miles as well. We used to go on hikes and remark about how untouched it was. It was so big, in fact, that you could easily get lost in there and just never come out. Now, one day, my mum, my aunt, two uncles and myself, age 13, were out on a hike heading towards a raspberry patch that we knew of when we heard a scream like nothing you had ever heard before. It was definitely a human scream from a female, but it was so loud that we all dropped to the ground as if someone was shooting bullets. I really don't know why this was the reaction that we had, but just down we went. All of us stood up eventually though, just sort of stunned and looked around. For about, I would say, 2 to 3 minutes, we looked in every direction, assuming that it was something near us. The scream honestly felt like it was right on top of us and sort of all around us at the same time. If you had told me that a jet fighter had passed over us like 30 feet up, I probably would have believed you at the time. It was at this point too that I remember my mum suggesting that we should go back. This sound clearly wasn't from any animal, nor was it from a machine. It was human, very human. But my uncle suggested that we just keep going, and so everyone else just kept going in further. By now, 2 to 3 minutes had passed, and we were all still on edge, but we assumed that it had to be something totally explainable. But then it happened, and as God is my witness, I'll never forget what I saw. The scream came back, but this time it was accompanied by something. My aunt saw it first and pointed to it, then we all saw it. About 50 feet away from us, and probably 30 feet up in the air, was a person gliding through the forest. It looked like someone sitting cross-legged, all in black, with long black hair. We didn't see where they started, but we could see them, or it, moving through the treetops, just under the canopy, at what had to be about 10 or 15 miles per hour. We watched too as it just went past, deeper and deeper into the forest. We could see about maybe a football field's length away, and just kind of stood there frozen until they were out of sight. And then we ran, and we ran until we were back at that cottage. After that, my mum never went back into that forest again. My uncle went out with a rifle the following day, but came back empty-handed. The cottage was sold years later once my aunt passed away, and nothing was ever really seen again. Now, I just want to inform you guys that it definitely was not a bird. It was not some sort of a pet monkey that escaped or anything like that as well. It was definitely a person, 100% a person, and whatever it was just flew through that forest as if it could fly on its own. My aunt went to her grave believing that it must have been a witch, and if you had told me for certain that it was, that would really answer a lot of things. But to give you an idea of just how it looked, think the girl from The Ring, only in all black. I know that I'll probably go to my grave wondering what I saw, but I do hope that one day I get an answer. So for reference, my boyfriend is about 6'3" and 275 to 300 pounds. He's very stocky, has a military-style haircut, actually is prior military, usually wears a shirt with guns on it in some way, and also has a very fierce beard. This is important for the story, and it's why I bring it up. So about 3 years ago, my boyfriend and I moved into a house with a couple of roommates near downtown in a big city of Michigan. I had sent him to the store for some staples or something while I started unpacking, and he texted me just after getting to the store saying that he had the weirdest thing happen in the parking lot, but he would tell me when he got home. 10 minutes later, he texted again saying that he was super creeped out and jokingly said, If I'm not on my way in 5, send help. This is his normal kind of humour, so I didn't think too much of it. And when he got home, he told me that on his way in from the parking lot, a man stopped him offering compliments on his beard. It actually happened a lot, so he didn't think much of it. But the guy was dressed as if he was a lawyer or a real estate agent with nice shoes and a nice watch. Very clean cut, so he wasn't too uncomfortable. He just said thanks and began walking inside. The guy continued walking with him, asking where he was from, what he did for a living, and if he had kids or a wife. His, my boyfriend, gut lit up like fireworks at this point, and after working in mental health for some time, he knew to trust it too. He made up some answers and told him to have a nice day, and the man said if you're ever interested in a new line of work, you're just the guy we're looking for. My boyfriend continued walking without responding and didn't look back though. A few minutes into shopping though, he noticed the same man was appearing in the same aisles as him, but would then turn around and go the other way. At one point, when he texted me, he said that he was sure the man snapped a photo of him from the other end of the aisle. We both commented on the craziness of that and said that must be some sort of human trafficking thing or something. But let it go, as it was over now and we didn't really want to believe it. Days later, we ran to the store to pick up some late-night snacks. We parked the car what felt like miles from the store. My boyfriend is the worst at this, and began to walk in. Thankfully, I don't really startle easily when we get out together because we both conceal carry, so I know if someone tried to attack either of us, we're decently prepared. But even I still jumped when a man's voice yelled out my boyfriend's name and added, and his pretty wife. My boyfriend said keep walking and don't hesitate. Thankfully, I knew what he meant, and I hauled my butt into the entryway of the store as I watched them walk and talk while watching for any suspicious people or cars around them. When they were almost inside, I went into the store and started chatting with the greeter, so he didn't get a chance to talk to me. The man again showed up in the aisles that we were in, and at one point even looked to be texting on his phone, but was holding it up in front of him. I'm almost positive that he took a photo of us at that point. We didn't finish getting snacks, and we just left the store. I waited with the greeter as my boyfriend got to the car, so I didn't have to walk through the dark lot. I'd been a powerlifter at that point for a little over a year and was in great shape. I mean, I was in the gym every day at the same time due to my work schedule and usually had my girl roommate with me, but today I was alone for a quick and light lifting session. And I wasn't even a minute into my gym time when that same guy walked in. I had never seen him there before, and instantly I knew something was up. I texted my boyfriend, but he was away for the military, so he was now panicking from a distance. Remember your training and keep your cool, is what he said. He wasn't in gym attire too, and didn't have a bag with him. We were also at the gym furthest from the area that we were from. They had the best equipment for my personal needs and gains, so I'm not sure why he would have chosen it, as he didn't have the I love gym vibe by any means. But he came over and said hello, and I politely said hello back, but didn't continue the conversation. He said a few more things, and a guy a few machines over I think could tell that I was uncomfortable. He came over and pretended to be my boyfriend, asking if I was ready to go. I said yes, and just needed to grab my things. The creepy man asked where my husband was, and I pretended not to hear him as I kept walking. When I came out, he was gone, but my best fake friend was waiting on the bench outside the locker room. He said that the man had left, but he had let the staff know what happened, and they said that he wasn't even a member, but said that he was there to pick up his girlfriend. I don't know, but my new best friend walked me to my car, and I just switched gyms after that. Thankfully, we now live very far away from the city, and I've never encountered him again, and neither has my boyfriend. But I honestly believe that they were trying to recruit him to make big money, possibly selling women, and that I may have just been a bonus woman to sell. And all I can say is, thank God for strangers who stand up and save women like me. While returning to New Mexico from a visit to my friend's family in Iowa, we were caught in a snowstorm on the Texas Panhandle. We were on Highway 60 right outside of a town called Canadian when we went off the road in this little Honda car. We tried digging it out and using the floor mats for traction, but to no avail. We could see what appeared to be the lights of a farmhouse nearby, and although it was 2 a.m., we elected to knock on the door and see if we could get help instead of freezing to death in a rare Texas blizzard out in the middle of nowhere. A tiny old woman entered the door, and when I say tiny, I mean 4 foot something, and ancient to boot. We explained, though, that we were stuck and needed a pull out of the ditch and how far to the next town, etc. Her tiny, maybe 5 foot something ancient husband came out and said that he'd pull us out with Zuzu and to follow him to the barn. Out in the barn was an old Ford Highboy with a CB radio and a .357 revolver in the front seat pocket. We all climbed in the cab. He rubbed the dash and said, "Come on, Zuzu," and proceeded to take us where we had to go off-road and yanked the little car out with no problem. We made it to Canadian and stayed in the nastiest roach motel that I'd ever been in, and slept on top of the covers with all of my clothes on. The next day, we drove back to New Mexico with no other incidences. Since I was on Highway 60 pretty regularly, I figured that I would stop in during the day and just drop off a gift and say thanks next time that I was in the area. The only problem is that right outside of Canadian, Texas on Highway 60, near that curve, there is no house in sight. No little old people, no barn, no Zuzu either. I've driven by there dozens of times since we went off-road that night in December, and I've pulled up the area on Google Maps, and I can tell you that there is just no trace of them anywhere. In the end, too, my buddy and I just concluded that guardian angels got us unstuck from the snow, and they just vanished. I grew up in La Crosse, WI, a semi-small city with a low crime rate, at least back in the day when I was like 14. It was such a quiet city that almost nobody locked their doors. People would say hi to each other on the street. You could pretty much go to anyone's house for dinner and your parents wouldn't be too nervous about it too, etc. And on top of that, you could always walk home by yourself at night from your middle school basketball game without fear, which was what I was doing on this particular night. So it had been a long game and went later than normal, and my parents both had to work in the morning, so they didn't want to go, which was fine. They went to all the other games, so they could get to bed early. It was an 8-minute walk from my middle school to my house, so there were no concerns about my safety. So I'm just walking, right? I'm wearing a pink sweater and jeans over my basketball jersey. My hair is a sweaty mess, but I was in a good mood because it was a good game. So I was walking in a sort of relaxed fashion, unconcerned and pretty much unaware. And that was when I felt it. I can't explain how I knew, but somehow I just knew that I was in some sort of danger. I looked around me, and parked near the blacktop fence was a Jeep with its lights off. I couldn't see who was inside, but I knew someone was for some reason. So I quickly ducked my head and walked away from it, hoping that I didn't catch their attention. No such luck, though, because the Jeep started following me. It pulled up next to me, and I saw the window open, and I just booked it. I didn't look back. I just ran. I had such a negative feeling about that Jeep. I didn't stop until I could see my parents' house, and I thought that I was safe. But just as I stopped to catch my breath, I heard an engine rev behind me, and that same Jeep was tearing down the street, beelining towards me. I was in a position where I couldn't run anywhere safe in time, a big open space near the road, so I just sort of stood there frozen in terror. I was backing up and must have looked every bit the victim with my sweaty hair and white face, because just as the Jeep pulled up near me and the door opened, some old guy across the street yelled something. I don't even know what the guy actually said, but the Jeep's door slammed shut and it just peeled away. I didn't even thank the guy in the end, which I feel bad about because he might have just saved me from something truly terrible. I instead just quickly ran home. I threw myself inside when I got there and I slammed the door behind me. scaring the life out of my mum, who was just heading to bed. When she asked me what was wrong, I told her and she woke up Dad. We considered calling the police, but since I didn't have a facial description or my license plate or anything, there wasn't much to give them in the end. All I knew is that it was a dark Jeep and it chased me. That night, my parents decided to never let me walk home from school again. And a week later, the newspaper said that there had been a gang rape of a young woman at a nearby parking garage, 5 minutes from my house. And yes, a Jeep was mentioned. So I work in a wildlife rehabilitation centre in the middle of the forest atop a hill, about 20 minutes away from the nearest streetlight. It's a beautiful property during the day, but at night, you can hardly see your hand in front of your face, unless the moon is high enough over the trees to shed a little bit of light on the area. For privacy's sake, I won't be giving the name or the location of the facility, though. So, I started working here last year, usually being put on the closing shift, 11 AM to 9 PM, but we typically were on property until the wee hours of the morning, since the sheer number of animals in our care prevented us from going home before everything was complete anyway. But the facility itself is deeply haunted. I've known this too since a couple of weeks into my employment. One of the routes for the Trail of Tears actually went right through what is now the property, but more on that later. These are some of the stories, though, that I've collected while working here. One night, as we were all wrapping up downstairs and getting ready to shut up for the evening, the doorbell rang. It must have been around 10 PM by then, I think, and we close admissions by 5 usually. All of our admissions are by appointment only, but on occasion we'll just get a walk-in. So, with a sigh, my co-worker goes upstairs to greet the person and take the animal down for a quick examination. After a few minutes, she comes back down, empty-handed and looking a bit unsettled. Upon being asked what the problem was, she answered, "There was no one at the door and there's no other car on the lot." This has happened at least 2 other times as well. I've always been open to the idea of the paranormal, but I'm also pretty skeptical by nature. I want to first rule out any other possible scenario before jumping to the conclusion of something otherworldly. So I just chalk these situations up to some sort of an electrical error or something like that. The building took on a whole new energy at night, though. The rooms of the facility that were well lit and normal during the day just felt more ominous at night. I never wanted to be alone inside by myself after 8:30, because after 8:30, things get weird. Mostly it's just the feeling that I'm being watched or thinking I see something out of the corner of my eye. It's all just very unsettling. As one of our interns was leaving one night, though, she said that she heard someone calling to her from the parking lot. Like, "Psst, hey, over here" kind of thing. And there was just nobody there. On another night, my co-workers went outside to finish up animal care in some of the outside enclosures that hadn't been done during the day, and I was left alone inside to finish preparing the diets for some of the raccoon babies that we had inside. We had a microwave above the counter, and I had long since gotten used to seeing my silhouette and the reflective sheen on the door. I reached up to retrieve the bowl that I'd put in the microwave and shut the door once I was done, only to see the reflection of a silhouette directly behind me. I whipped around so fast that I nearly dropped the bowl, but nobody was standing behind me. And when I looked back into the reflection, the silhouette just wasn't there anymore. As I said previously, the Trail of Tears ran through the property, and at least 2 of my co-workers have made separate comments about seeing a woman in buckskin either walking through the hallway or standing in the laundry room. She always moves out of sight before anyone can try to say something to her, and we have a separate little building on the property that's now a storage unit. Once upon a time, it actually housed interns that would stay on site overnight, but it's been a long time since it's been used for that purpose. And you know, I've always just gotten a weird feeling whenever I'm near it. I've never been inside, and honestly, I hope that I'll never have to. Anytime I walk past it, I just feel incredibly unsettled, like there's someone standing behind me or just watching me. several months ago, I was informed that we no longer have interns living in the building because late one night, a man walked in and stood in the doorway, staring at the interns while they were trying to sleep. Since then, we've installed trail cams and security cameras just all over the property. There's 1,000,001 more stories that I can tell about this place, and maybe one day I will, but so far, these are the only true paranormal feeling ones that I have to tell. I'll be sure to make some updates in the future if anything else of significant happens to occur, but that's it for now, and I hope you enjoyed the stories.